So advanced Java, Java EE. So what is this Java EE? Is Java EE stands for Java Enterprise Edition. Java EE stands for what? Java Enterprise Edition. The main use of doing with Java EE is Java EE is used to develop Java EE is used to develop web applications and enterprise applications. Java EE is used for what? To develop web applications and enterprise applications. Then, under this Java EE, it goes with the components of Java EE. They are web components and enterprise components. These web components are used to develop web applications. They are used for what? To develop web applications, and the components are servlets and JSP. So using the servlets and JSP, we can develop web applications. JSP stands for Java Server Pages. Enterprise components used to develop enterprise applications. When you say enterprise applications, these are more secured, distributed. Distributed means application to application interaction. One application can interact with another application running in two different servers. Okay. And the component is EJB, stands for Enterprise Java Beans. So this EJB is outdated now. People are not at all using this EJB. So what we are using over EJB now means we are making use of Spring framework. We are using what? Spring. Now, so under this Java EE, we are going to do these two topics, servlets and JSP. Now, whenever we go for Java EE applications, these applications are accessed by multiple clients. Multiple users can access this application. If you want to make the application to be used by multiple clients, we need to deploy, means copy the application onto the server. So to develop Java EE applications, we require what? Server. In order to go with Java EE applications, we require server. So you can say Java EE applications are accessed by multiple clients. Java EE applications are accessed by whom? Multiple clients, means multiple users. And in order to make the Java EE application to be used by multiple clients, we need to deploy, means copy the application onto the server. So we require what? Server to develop Java EE applications. There are two types of servers. Like web servers and application servers. Web servers and application servers. These web servers are used to develop web applications only. Web servers are used to develop what? Only web applications. That means it can understand servlets and JSP. And the popular web server is Apache Tomcat. Apache Tomcat is the popular web server. Then, coming to application server, used to develop web applications and enterprise applications. Use it for what? To develop web applications and enterprise applications, means it can understand servlets, JSP, and even EJB also. And the popular application servers are Oracle, Glassfish, Oracle, WebLogic, IBM, WebSphere, Red Hat, JBoss, like this. These are popular web application servers. Then in our codes, we are going to use Tomcat server. So if you know one server how to configure in Eclipse, the same way we are going to do other servers. So when I'm going to configure this Tomcat, I'll be even elaborating how to go with other servers. It's very, very simple to configure. So in our case, we'll be using Tomcat server, right? So that is the introduction part of Java EE. Now let us move to the next one, servlets. This is the major thing to discuss. Servlets. What is the main use of HTML? Anyone? What is the use of HTML?
Web page. Web page
To develop
development.
static web pages. So static word is important there. To develop static web pages. In order to add dynamic content to your web page, which concept do we need to use?
JavaScript.
JavaScript. We go with JavaScript. But using JavaScript, we can go with what? Only dynamic web pages. It's only web pages. So, and it will be running on the client machine only. It will be running on where? Client machine only. Now we want to develop an application where we should able to connect to databases, provide security, session management. All these things are not possible using JavaScript. So when you are able to provide security, database connection, everything, we call application. We call it as, instead of web page, we call it as web application, and that we want to make it run on the server side. In that case, we go with what? Servlets. So you can say servlets are used to develop server-side dynamic web applications. Servlets are what purpose? To develop server-side dynamic web applications. Just a second. So servlets are mainly for what? To develop server-side dynamic web applications. Okay. So server side means it will be running on the server machine, and multiple users can connect to that application to access the application. So it will be running on the server machine. That is very, very important to understand. We are having other technologies also, which are used to develop server-side dynamic web applications. Technologies used to develop server-side dynamic web applications. Technologies used to develop server-side dynamic web applications. They are related to Java, Servlets, ASP, and we can even go with Spring MVC. We are having other technologies like .NET related, ASP.NET, PHP. Then we can go with Django. And here the code what we do is using Python here. Right? So in our codes, we'll be learning these three topics: Servlets, JSP, and Spring MVC to develop server-side dynamic web applications. Now, let us go with servlets. Let us start off with servlets hierarchy. This diagram is very important. Servlets hierarchy. In this servlet hierarchy, the topmost interface under servlet hierarchy is servlet interface. So when you say interface, interface contains what type of methods? When you say interface, interface contains what type of methods? By
Public
default,
and
the
abstract.
methods in interface are abstract. Very good. By default, the methods in interface are abstract methods. The servlet interface methods are init, service, destroy, get servlet info, get servlet config, get servlet context. So these are the methods present in servlet interface, and all these are what? Abstract methods. Then under this servlet, it goes with a subclass. Servlet interface goes with a subclass, generic servlet class. This generic servlet class implements servlet interface. Generic servlet class implements servlet interface. And the diagrammatic symbol of implements is dotted triangle arrowhead. Dotted triangle arrowhead. This is a symbol of implements. Now, when a class implements an interface, we need to override the methods of interface here. We need to override methods of interface. So in this generic servlet class, all methods of servlet interface are overridden. All methods of servlet interface are overridden except service method. Except which method? Service method. Means service method is still abstract here. Service method is abstract. So when a class implements an interface, and if you are not overriding all the methods, then what keyword we have to use before the class? What keyword we have to use?
Abstract.
Very good. We have to use what keyword here? Abstract. So whenever a class extends an abstract class, or when a class implements an interface, we need to override all abstract methods. If you are not overriding one also, we have to make your class once again as abstract. So in this case, service method is not overridden. So this generic servlet is an abstract class. Then under generic servlet, it goes with a subclass, HTTP servlet class. This HTTP servlet class extends generic servlet, and the diagrammatic symbol of extends is triangle arrowhead. Right? When HTTP servlet class extends generic servlet class, which method need to be overridden now? Which method need to be overridden? Which method is still abstract in generic servlet? Which method is still abstract here? Service, right?
Mhm.
So in this, service method is overridden. Service method is overridden. So because service method is still abstract in generic servlet, so if a class extends abstract class, the abstract methods need to be overridden. So here service method is overridden. Even though there are no abstract methods in HTTP servlet class, understand carefully, even though there are no abstract methods in HTTP servlet class, they made this class as abstract. The reason behind this is, can we create objects for abstract classes? No. Can we create objects? No. So Java people want to form a rule that whenever a programmer want to create a servlet, they cannot use generic servlet or HTTP servlet class directly. They cannot use what? Generic servlet class or HTTP servlet class directly. They have to create subclasses of either generic servlet or HTTP servlet. So in order to form the rule to create subclass of generic servlet or HTTP servlet, they made these classes as what here? Abstract. And when we go with HTTP servlet, we generally override the methods. When we go with HTTP servlet, we generally override the methods to get and do post. To get and do post. Clear up here this diagram?
Raj, this HTTP servlet class, even though it is abstract, it is extending another abstract class, right? So
Right.
no need to implement the other methods in the HTTP servlet, like
No. Yes.
other methods except
Other
service.
no, not required, because these all other methods except service, remaining methods are already overridden in generic servlet. They are already overridden. So in HTTP servlet, only the rule is which method is still abstract here? Service. Only service method is overridden in HTTP servlet class. Okay, remaining all other methods are already present in generic servlet. So we need not override those methods once again in HTTP servlet. We means Java people. Okay, these all things whatever I am discussing, these are already predefined codes. Okay.
Okay. So this
Right.
will be applicable even for any other classes, right? If we are having
Yes.
two abstract classes, one is extending another. When we are creating a third class, whichever is unimplemented or unoverridden, we can only override those in the extending class.
Which is mandatory. Mandatory is we have to override those methods compulsory. We can even override other methods, but is optional. It is related to developer end only.
Yeah.
So nothing rule that we should not override. No, not like that concept. We can even override the methods, but its compiler will not say anything to override. Got it?
Okay. Yeah, got it, Raj.
Right? So in this general example, I'm saying in this HTTP servlet class, I should override only service, or even can I override init method, destroy method? In this HTTP, can I even override init method, destroy method? Yes, no worries, nothing problem. But if you are not overriding, will compiler will give error? No, no error. But mandatory is to override service. Remaining all are optional. Remaining all are optional. Even we can override also, no problem. Got it?
Yeah, Raj, got it.
Right. And what is the point I said? When we go with HTTP servlet, generally we go with what? Two methods, do get and do post. More on do get and do post I'll discuss in the next classes. When to think of do get method and when to think of do post method. Right? So we'll be referring to this diagram again and again in the next classes also. The next one, Servlet Architecture. Servlet Architecture. It's a very simple diagram. So when you want to develop a web applications, what we require? We require a server. We require what? Server. Then in server, we are going to deploy the servlets. We are going to deploy what? Servlets means we copy. Application we are going to copy into the server. Then when you go with web applications, who is the client for web applications? Who is the client? Browser, right? For web applications, if I want to open Amazon.com or Gmail.com, what we have to open on our system? Browser. So browser is the client for web applications. Then from browser, what are the data you are sending to the server or servlet? We call it as request. The data what you are sending from browser to servlet, we use the term request. Like example, if you open browser and type the URL www.gmail.com, then you are making a request to Gmail server. And what Gmail is going to give back to us? The login page. It's going to give back to us the login page. That we call it as response. That we call it as what? Response. The data which is coming from server or browser back to browser, that we call it as response. Now once we get the response, that is login page, we type the username and password, and once we click on login, the username and password will go as request data to servlet, and in response we get inbox page. Like this. So the data which is going from browser to server is called as request. The data which is coming from server to browser is called as response. Two important words here. Now let us understand the next concept here, servlet lifecycle. The meaning of lifecycle is a collection of methods which are executed in an order automatically by the servlet container. Lifecycle is what? It is a collection of methods which are executed in an order automatically by the servlet container. Means your server. Container means server only. Okay. And the lifecycle methods are init, the servlet interface methods only. Init, service, and destroy. These three methods are considered as the lifecycle methods. Now, when these methods will get executed is init method. These methods are invoked automatically. We need not invoke this. So init method called only once when servlet is loaded. This method is invoked only once when servlet is loaded. Means when you make a request to a servlet for the first time, it goes to init method. And in this init method, what type of code we write is generally we establish database connections. What type of code we write here? We do database connections. Then service method called for every request. So let me elaborate about request once again more here. So if you take a banking application like example www.icicibank.com. So you are making a request to ICICI Bank server. In response, we get login page. So once we type username and password, when you click on login, it's a request. When you click on mini statement, it's a request. When you click on payables, it's a request. When you click on transfer funds, it's a request. So whatever the click operation you are doing, it's a request. So the code behind your request is present where? In service method. Now if I do database connection in service method, for every request it is going to do database connection, which is not good. That's the reason we do database connection in init method, so that one connection can be used for multiple requests. Destroy method called only once when servlet is destroyed, means when we close the browser window. Then generally we close database connections. Generally what we do the closing operations. We close database connections. Right? So complete example on this I'll be discussing when we develop a very big application using all these things. Okay. So in the next classes I'll show the complete example on this servlet lifecycle by doing database connections from our servlet application. Right? Any questions anyone up to here? No. Today all theoretical words only. So next class only we go with practical part. Now, next one, creating a servlet. How to create a servlet? We are having two ways of creating servlet. By creating a class which extends generic servlet class, or by creating a class which extends HTTP servlet class. Either you can go with generic servlet or HTTP servlet. Then let us essentially go with using generic servlet class. We have to create a class. The class must be public as we access from outside. Public class welcome servlet extends generic servlet. Public class welcome servlet extends generic servlet. Now, when a class extends generic servlet, see the diagram again. Which method need to be overridden compulsory? If any class extends generic servlet, which method need to be overridden?
All the methods except service.
No, you are saying reverse way. When a class extends generic servlet, which method need to be overridden compulsory? This one, only this is abstract, right? Only which method is abstract in generic servlet? Only service method. So which method need to be overridden? If any class extends generic servlet, which method need to be overridden? Only service method. Remaining all are optional. So here also, when this class, when welcome servlet extends generic servlet, in generic servlet, which method is still abstract? Only service is abstract. Only service is abstract. So we have to override only which method? Service method compulsory. To override service method compulsory. And this service method takes two arguments: servlet request, servlet response. And this method throws servlet exception and IO exception. And in this service method, we handle the request. The code behind your request we write in service method. Clear all of you up to here? Now, using HTTP servlet, if you create a class welcome servlet extends HTTP servlet. So when you go with HTTP servlet class, do we need to override any methods compulsory? Means no, because in HTTP servlet there are no abstract methods. So we need not override any methods compulsory. So if you are not overriding, compiler will not say anything. But as a programmer, we override two methods, that is doGet which takes argument HTTP servlet request, HTTP servlet response, and this method throws same servlet exception and IO exception. And in this method, we handle the request. We can even override do post. When to think of do get and when to think of do post, and what is the advantage of overriding both the methods, I'll be discussing in the next class. One more important note. Interface HTTP servlet request extends servlet request. Interface HTTP servlet response extends servlet response. By seeing this code, we can easily say HTTP servlet request and HTTP servlet response are what? They are interfaces. They are all interfaces. Then what about servlet request and servlet response? The servlet request and servlet response, are they interface or class? These two, are they interface or class?
Interface.
Interfaces. Very good. They are what? Interfaces. Some people answer it as class. It's wrong. Because if you remember in object oriented, I've given one point. That is, in between class to class, which keyword we have to use? Extends, right? In between class to class, we use extends keyword. In between class to interface, which keyword we use? Implements. In between interface to interface, extends. So by seeing this note, interface to interface, which keyword? Extends. So because of this note, we can easily say the servlet request and response are what? Interfaces. But interface to class, is it possible? No. This will go with error. Interface to class, not possible. So don't say that these are classes. So when you are having interface, other side, if you write extends and write something, they are also interfaces. So interface to class, not at all possible. So in this case, this HTTP servlet request extends servlet request and HTTP servlet response extends servlet response. Now, when to think of generic servlet and when to think of HTTP servlet. That is, generic servlet wise HTTP servlet. Generic servlet wise HTTP servlet. Generic, the word generic only saying, generic servlet is used for different protocols like FTP, SMTP, HTTP, etc. Whereas HTTP servlet is used only for HTTP protocol. Expansions are FTP means file transfer protocol, SMTP simple mail transfer protocol, HTTP means everyone knows hypertext transfer protocol. So nowadays, whenever we go with web applications, it's automatically going with what? HTTP. So in our case also, we'll be going with HTTP protocol only. We'll be using HTTP. And even by default, the IDE like Eclipse will make use of HTTP only by default. So in our case, we'll be creating servlets using HTTP servlet. Right? Clear up here, all of you? Okay, so let me stop here the theoretical parts. So we'll be going with the next class. In the next class, we'll see how to download Tomcat server, how to configure Tomcat server in Eclipse, and how to create a servlet. That is how to create a web project in Eclipse and how to create a servlet in web project. Okay, so that complete example we'll be doing in the next class.